Sean here with BaseMint Comics, and this weekend I had initially planned on doing a Corner Box Classics for the end of February 1982. I got 4 issues for that one, and I just keep kicking that one down the road because things happen, or, I'm not exactly feeling it, because I will admit, those 4 books, I'm sort of, they not doing much for me. I've had to pick one of them up and down quite a few times to kind of get through it. And I was like, oh, I don't really feel like talking about these tonight, so I'll probably wind up tacking that on to the end of Wednesday's video. And so for tonight, I felt like talking about my comic book origin story because I have touched on it. And then this weekend, post Thanksgiving, on Saturday, my wife and I and her family all went to a parade in her hometown, like a Santa parade in where she grew up, and took Hank to that. And then that evening, it started snowing here like crazy. We got probably like 5 or 6 inches. I think they were saying we were going to get like 7 to 9, but it wound up being like 4 to 6 or whatever. And so while all that was going on, I took the 2 of them. I don't live that far from where I grew up. And it's a cute little town that does... lots of stuff. There's like a part. It's Stars Hollows-esque if you're a fan of Gilmore Girls, like my wife is. Like a park with a fountain. I've talked about it before because it's where they filmed a good chunk of it. It stood in for Woodsboro in Scream 4 is the town that I grew up in, and it's where I lived a mile. I lived on one end of the town. You had to kind of like bike through the town square or whatever. And then on the other end of town by the railroad tracks was my comic shop at the time. And so I would, that's where I first started my pedaling to the comic book shop journey. I figured, like, since I was hanging out down there with the little guy and it was snowy and there were, like, everything's lined with Christmas trees and they do an ice sculpture fest there when that, once we're in, like, the real, like, 10 degree, well, it's just a cute, quainty little thing. And it sparked, like, oh, hey, I remember, like, there's a movie theater there that shows like old movies for like $2. Really beautiful old theater that the town saved last year, and in saving it wound up like playing It's a Wonderful Life at Christmas time, which was pretty fun. And it's the first place that my wife ever saw Raiders of the Lost Ark because she'd never seen that on the big screen, so we went to see that there years and years ago. And it was kind of funny because some of the people that we were talking to in line were amazed that she had never seen Raiders. So they wound up actually like sitting next to us and watching her most of the time during the movie. It's where I first saw Edward Scissorhands, and when my big sister took me to see Edward Scissorhands there, and when we left, that's when they were doing the Ice Sculpture Festival, so that is like ingrained in my mind because of the, the film and ice sculptures, and then you walk outside and it's snowing and you're a little kid drinking hot chocolate and there's ice sculptures going on. That's going to leave an imprint. But next to that movie theater was a record shop called Repeat the Beat. And that's where I first started getting into music. I'd pedal up there and I'd buy albums. And right down the road was this comic book store, which I loved dearly, and was very sad when they didn't go out of business. They chose to close up shop for health reasons, but I adored it. They were great to me. And I don't know how they were with the rest of their customer base because I was like, 11, 12, so I wasn't really paying attention to anybody. But what I do remember about it most is that the owner wanted it to be a record shop, and he had built these like beautiful wood crates to put records in, and those are what wound up having the back issues in it. And X-Men books were so hot at the time. It was the, you know, boom of the 90s, that the back issues for the X-Men were like behind the counter. So I had to go and ask, and then be like let behind the counter, and like you know, flip through those and pick up one or two when I could. I laugh now when I think back of the prices of those back issues, because holy smokes, it's nothing compared to what they are these days. And so Wednesday was like my mom would pick my best friend up from his school. We went to separate schools, and she would pick me up from school after him, because he got out a little bit earlier than I did. And then we'd head up to the comic book store. This is like when we were in middle school, and we had like a church thing to do on Wednesday nights. And so we'd like pick up our comics, go do that. And then when that was done, it was kind of like have dinner at one or the other's house and read our comics and play with our toys. And but before I get into all of that, I suppose I should discuss my origin story of getting into the X-Men, which is what led me into comics. So, first comic book that I ever picked up, I'd heard rumblings of the X-Men in my elementary school playground. Toys had just hit the market, like that first wave in 1991. Cards were a big deal. Pogs were a thing, if anybody remembers Pogs. I did not get into those because I'm not into the idea of like child gambling. And the idea of me buying Pogs and then playing some scumbag in my school and him being able to steal a cool Gambit one would just piss me off. So that wasn't my cup of tea. Previous to, I have always been kind of locked in when it comes to my interest. My two older brothers kind of flit through things very quickly. I sort of was like, I'd find an interest and I would stick to it, which I'm sure my parents loved, because I wasn't like cycling through whatever the new hot thing was. And so my oldest brother was into Transformers. My younger but still older than me brother, he was into G.I. Joe. And so I was able to kind of like dabble in those worlds and play with the toys, obviously like through them, you know, like kind of their interest just bled on to me as I was a kid. And then my two main things pre-Marvel were the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Legos, which both haunt me, because when we moved out of that house, my oldest brother wound up moving in, and he, before I could get all of my stuff out of there, threw it all out. So there's some childhood like aggravation there, especially every time that I see, because I was big into those like pirate ship Legos, you know, the Barracuda, and every time that I see secondary like market prices on the, not that I would sell them, but holy smokes, I could the comics I could buy if I were to have held on to those Ninja Turtles and Legos. So anyways, I will admit, while in elementary school, I had moved schools in the summer of the 3rd grade going into the 4th grade. And I didn't know anybody at the new school, except for one kid that I went to church with. So I was certain that he was going to be friends with me, because we were friendly at church. And, you know, you're kind of raised, at least I thought at the time, in that environment to be like, you know, not a dick. And this kid turned out to 100% be a dick. So elementary school, 4th and 5th grade was not super easy for me, but I was friends with another kid from church, and we didn't go to school together, sadly, but we were best pals and saw each other all the time. And actually, the kid that I learned that I didn't like He once, after school, when I was up there playing, because I lived right down the road from the school, and there was a creek behind the school and woods you could play in, him and some of the other kids kind of showed up when me and my pal Chris were there, and they were all like, well, we don't like him, so if you got rid of him, you know, we'd be pals with you. And I was like, and I very more colorfully told them to kick rocks, and Chris and I are still friends, and he's Henry's godfather. So he and I were best pals, and that was basically it as far as friends go. But that's all right. You only need one good one. And so one day I decided I'm really, like, I caught a couple episodes of the X-Men, the animated series, really got into it, and I was like, I kind of love this Gambit character, and I would like to go and pick up an action figure of that character. And so I did. This is my childhood Gambit toy, and you can see I painted his eyes red. I even painted because that, you know, was how it looked in the comic books. Obviously I didn't do that the first day that I got it, but that happened over time. So this toy has been, this is like the, in Toy Story terms, this is my Woody. This fella went everywhere with me and is well loved. And when you bought that toy, you got, I still have one in a poly bag. You got Uncanny X-Men Annual number 17 from 1993. And this was the summer where they introduced new villains in every single annual, and they came with a trading card. So anytime I see this in its poly bag form, I pick it up. It's a compulsion. This is the actual version this is the first comic book that I read. And here's the kicker. So I know nothing other than a few episodes of the cartoon that I have recorded to a VHS tape. I pick up this comic, and anytime that anyone on the internet or anywhere else brings up how inaccessible comic books are, how confusing it are, I chuckle to myself, because if you're familiar with this issue, or if you're not, I'm going to go into it. This deals with, obviously, they introduced the Executioner. He takes on Colossus and Storm in this issue. But the other thing that is going on is Jean Grey has received word from, like, you don't even know that this is going, you're just kind of dropped into this. Jean's at the mall. She's got a kid. They're buying X-Men toys. The X-Men are celebrities, like Bishop and Shard are members. And then all of a sudden, like, Ice Master's X-Men show up with Iceman and Wolverine and Havoc and Polaris and Xavier. Ice Master's X-Men, right? And so, like, this is all wild and crazy. And Scott is there, and Rachel and Nathan are little, and all of a sudden they're in a hospital room unconscious because Jean got a letter that Jason Weingard, Mastermind, wanted to make amends for everything that had happened during the Dark Phoenix saga, you know, dating all the way back to X-Men number 4 when the character was first introduced, and all the torturous things that he's done to Jean, right? So this is what's happening there. Colossus and Archangel and Storm are aware that they're in there, but they can't get into this hospital room because Jason is dying of the legacy virus. And so his powers are kind of, he's not doing this on purpose. They're just out of control. And he believes that he's giving Jean the life that she would want with the kids, and it's crazy and confusing, and it's an illusion. And then all of a sudden, Carl Dente, this dude who's connected to an FBI agent that worked with Xavier way back in the 60s, shows up in this, like, Shi'ar alien armor, and he goes to take on those guys because he's the executioner of bad guys. It's all crazy. Point being that my introduction to the X-Men made me believe that Iceman was a leader. He was not. But point is, anytime I'm in a comic shop and somebody's like, this is too inaccessible for me, I'm just like, man, it doesn't matter what your first is. Like, whatever hooks you, just dive in and figure it out. And I mean, this was pre-internet. There was no Wikipedia for me to go to. There was nothing. Like this, there was official handbook of the Marvel Universe was about the best that I could do if I could find those in the back issue bins. So this is probably the most confusing jumping on point for any kid. And let me tell you, this hooked the hell out of me. Never looked back. So, very confusing, very interesting start to my comic book career. So this is the first Uncanny X-Men annual number 17 from 1993. This is the very first comic book that I picked up. There were Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles adventures and stuff that I would get in my stocking before them, but like the first comic book that I bought, like I'm getting into comics, this one that came with this Gambit action figure. So I picked this up, okay, this Gambit action figure, and I am nervous as hell to call my best friend because I'm like, man, we're into turtles, and you know, like is he gonna be like, I don't want to get into X-Men? That's, you know. So I call him up and I'm like, hey man, I got something I gotta tell you. And I tell him that I picked up this Gambit toy and got a comic book. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, I was so nervous because my dad took me up to Target and he bought this Cyclops. So on the very same day, the two of us wind up picking up X-Men action figures. And normally I bust everything out of the packages, but I have a few of these that are near and dear to my heart that I bought. Obviously, these are not from my childhood. These are more recent pickups. But those are the ones that are nearest and dearest to me. We're going to go through some other stuff here that explains away some of that origin. So obviously, cartoon was a big one. And getting these, the Creator's Choice, Night of the Sentinels, and Enter Magneto and Deadly Reunions from Pizza Hut. There was a Pizza Hut right down the road. And if you are in my age bracket, you remember when Pizza Hut, like the actual restaurant, like you could sit down, you could eat there. They had the cool lampshades, and they gave away kick-ass things like these VHSs and some Pizza Hut X-Men comics that I have around here somewhere. And these were great because they had interviews like Stan Lee with Fabian Nicieza and Scott Lobdell. And so that was fantastic. Those would have been the first two copies of the cartoon that I got. And then obviously, like, I grew up in a time period where you could record, obviously, with your VHS player off of the TV. And Chris's mother was one of the first people I ever knew that had like the dual cassette recorder for VHSs. So because she was a big Star Trek The Next Generation person, and so she had them all without commercials. So all of my X-Men tapes got duped that way, so I could lose some of the commercials, which I admit now in retrospect, I would kind of like to see some of those old commercials. I remember my introduction to, four-time Juno award-winning Canadian masterminds, the Bare Naked Ladies, was a song called The Ballad of Gordon about a weird alien. And that was tacked on to the end of like a Power Rangers episode or an X-Men episode. And that was my introduction to four-time Juno award-winning BNL. So that's the cartoon. Obviously, the cartoon hook was a big part of it. Another big part of it, I sadly do not have the cases for these anymore, but they still work. The X-Men Sega Genesis games, I loved this one more than the first one. The first one, we played it one summer. Chris spent the summer at a friend of ours from church, like they were friends of our parents. She watched him while his parents worked, and he played this game religiously, and this game pissed me off because you couldn't like use your mutant power all the time. But there was a really fun like outer space one where they're like on the outside of a spaceship while it's flying, and I always enjoyed being Nightcrawler in that one because you could kind of stick. But this one, X-Men 2, The Clone Wars, man, like no start menu. This game just starts. Like you just immediately get blasted by something if you're not paying attention. And I loved the hell. I'm not a gamer at all, but occasionally there will be a X-Men or Marvel game that convinces me to buy a gaming system and go. Like I had a Sega and I had a PlayStation when that first came out. Love that Spider-Man game. And then I wound up getting, Chris was coming home. He joined the military and was he's been gone for forever, and I only see him like once, maybe twice a year if I'm lucky. But this one year he had a ton of time off, and it lined up with when Marvel Ultimate Alliance came out. So I remember I specifically, like when I found out that he was coming home, I like bought a PlayStation 2. I'd gotten like a bonus at work, and so I was like, PlayStation 2, made a huge pot of chili, might have been soup, but I think it was chili, and bought that Marvel Ultimate Alliance game, and he and I played it for an entire weekend, and it was fantastic. Okay, so let's see. Let's go with first comic I ever got as a gift. So the first comic I ever got as a gift, the brother that is closest in age to me is 5 years older than me, and he had a part-time job working at this restaurant called Bill Knapp's, and he saved up his money, and there was a copy of Uncanny X-Men 266, the first appearance of Gambit, that I used to peddle up to our shop, my shop. He didn't really collect comics. He was more into sports cards, but obviously card comics, so clearly there were cards there. So he'd look around at that, but he could always tell that I would literally just stand there and stare at the wall books and stare at the first appearance of Gambit. And I'd look at that thing all the time. Then I pedal up there one day and it's gone. Like it's just off the wall, and I am devastated. Lo and behold, my birthday rolls around in a few weeks, and I open up from him. He bought me a boombox CD player so I could finally switch from tapes, because yes, I first started out in tapes, and he got me Nirvana's Nevermind and Soul Asylum's Let Your Dim Light Shine, and a copy of Uncanny X-Men 266. So that was a pretty good brother to buy me like a CD boombox, a couple of albums, kick-ass albums, by the way, that I still love to this day, and the first appearance of Gambit. And I got it signed in 2019, it looks like, by Joe Rubinstein. And so that was the first time anyone bought me a comic book gift. So set the bar pretty high for comic book gifts. Get me the old Uncanny X-Men 266. Now, at Christmas time, my folks would get me the Dark Phoenix Saga trade, which I adore, and I believe I've shown off before because I have it signed by Claremont Byrne. Tom Warzakowski did a Banff. Claremont wrote dialogue in it. It's all fantastic. But previous to that, for that same birthday, my birthday is a few months. My birthday is in October. We've covered this because that's when I started Cornerbox Classics. My folks got me some trade paperbacks, and the first was Extinction Agenda, which is an X-Men crossover that I absolutely love. And Chris's folks owned a cabin up north in northwestern Michigan, and we would spend a lot of time there in the summertime. I'd go up there for like Easter break if I felt like it. And it subbed as, when it came to our toys, it subbed as either the Savage Land or Genosha, depending on what we were doing. And so I have very fond memories of reading this over and over again while listening to my Sony Discman as we drove up to that cabin. And then that same birthday, they got me Longshot, which is a character that I absolutely love. And I have eventually, like, I have the single issues for every single one of these, but these trades will always be in my collection because, you know, they were the thing that started it. But I did, I got it signed by Art Adams and Ann Nocenti. Let's see, Art Adams signed it in 13, and I believe Ann Nocenti was just recently, like 2 years ago, maybe. And let's see, another one of the birthday things that first year was I really wanted a Nightcrawler toy. He was slowly making his way. He was slowly, like, possibly dethroning Gambit at that point. And I did not get it. But what wound up happening is when all the rest of the family had left, because my sister's my oldest sister, her birthday is Halloween. So mine's mid-October. So my folks would just be like, hey, we're going to celebrate all the birthdays together. And everybody's already coming over for Halloween to do trick-or-treating and all that type of stuff. So we'll just, you know, your birthday will be on Halloween. So after Halloween was done and all that type of stuff, my mom was like, she pulled like the old man in A Christmas Story, where she was like, oh, did you get everything you want? And I was like, yeah, but she could tell there was like a hint of reservation there. And she was like, oh, I think there's one more thing here. And it wound up being Nightcrawler. And this is a well-loved Nightcrawler doll. I had two because I wanted to remove, I've got one in a package. You can see it has the suction cups on it, which are great for suction into car windows or bedroom windows and having them climb up things, but not great for mobility of play. So I bought two, and this one I cut off the, I obviously removed the suction cups from this one. The one that she gave me that still had the suction cups, when she passed away, I left it in the casket with her. So that is where that Nightcrawler toy resides. But this one stays with me, and I love it dearly, and I look forward to the day where Henry can play with it. And then let's see. So now, obviously, the other thing that would have caused many people our age to go nuts would be the, you know, cards. But I'll actually probably get into those in more depth down the line, because I have quite a few sets and series of those that I'd like to go into, but I at least wanted to touch on it since it was a big part of the origin story of getting me into this. And so the last thing that I will talk about is the first comic that I ever biked to. Obviously, a big part of my channel is riding up to the comic book shop with my little sidekick Hank. And the shop that I grew up with was about a mile from my house through the little quaint town. So I would bike up there often, but the book that sticks out to me that I remember like being like, I must pedal up to the comic book store to get this, is Wolverine number 87, because look at how cool that cover is. Like Gambit and Wolverine jumping through, clearly being followed by someone with a scope. And I adore this issue and run. And like I said, I think more than likely my attachment to that evening like bike ride to go get this is probably better than the actual issue, but it obviously holds a warm place in my heart. And that I remember picking up, well, I remember my mom doing kind of a very similar thing that she did with the Nightcrawler, with this Wolverine right before Christmas, around the time period that I was pedaling up to get this. Picked up this Wolverine toy. I've lost the sword and the hat, the cowl, but clearly, obviously, in this one, still in the package, you can see it. And this too is a dude who got plenty of time on the old battlefield around my old house and neighborhood and up north and all sorts of places, and he is going to get a second life with the little guy here relatively soon. Obviously there had to be another person at the end that was looking at these dudes through the scope, and that was a character named Maverick, who I knew very little about. But man, between this issue and that Christmas, I became like Kevin Spacey in Seven, obsessed with getting this toy for Christmas, this Maverick toy for Christmas. I swear to God, I probably, journaling, I'm sure that from September of 94 to Christmas Day of 94, I must have absolutely looked like a maniac, writing about how badly I wanted this friggin' toy for Christmas that year. Sadly, he has some battle damage. This arm broke off, so he had to be glued back together. But, again, all of these things were well loved. They were played with well past the time period that society would have told me that it was inappropriate to play with toys, because they still get dusted off the shelves occasionally at Christmas time, which is a video for a whole other time. But, never let go of that. So that is how I got it, how this 64-page annual from 1993 kicked off, all of this. And a love that has lasted and never waned since then. So that's pretty exciting. That's better than me talking about 4 issues from February 1982, which I will. I swear to God, I will get through those issues this week, I promise. So that has it. This is like the genesis kind of every little touchstone that you could kind of put together, that kind of led to my love of the X-Men and the wider Marvel universe. So there you have it. So again, thanks for tuning in for this part. Sorry if you were looking forward to me talking about Dazzler from February 23rd, 1982. That will be up in a couple days. But hopefully this was a nice little divergence. You get to know a little bit more about me. And I really dig comic book origin stories. Like, I like hearing about what got people into it. I know that a good chunk of like my age group, it was cartoons, be it X-Men or the Batman Adventures or Spider-Man. I know that one of the things I didn't touch upon in that quaint little town, there was a bar called the Box Bar that my folks and Chris's parents and some of the other people from their Bible study would go to have drinks and dinner. And in the back of that joint, many a quarter were dumped into, what was it, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Time? Was that one of them? That it's the one where they're like in the building in the beginning. I don't know if that's Turtles in Time, but there was that, and there was an X-Men arcade machine, and I have the X-Men arcade in this room. It's just you can't see it, but you will. I'm thinking. Anyways, dumped a ton of quarters into that, so that video game was also a very big proponent into propelling me into this mania. I'm thinking room tour after Christmas. Right now there's like Christmas lights up, and I have Christmas decorations all over the place down here, so it doesn't like, it looks how it normally looks, but it's just Christmasified. And I think I'd like to have like that stuff down to show how it looks 10 out of the 12 months a year. So new year, show you this is what it looks like, and I'll finally do a room tour. And if you think these videos are long, holy smokes, I could do a Ken Burns style documentary on what everything in this room means to me, and we'll get there. So if you dig this thing that I'm doing, which I hope you are, please like, comment, and subscribe. Comment in the comments, because I love other people's like origin of what got them into this. Please let me know, like, what got you hooked on comic books and into this type of stuff. I would love to hear it. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I will be back on Wednesday. Like I said, hopefully all the snow is still around, and we're going to do a snowy bike ride up to the comic book shop to pick up a couple books. I'll talk about stuff that I liked from last week, the books from this week, and then I'll probably tack on those 4 corner box classics at the end of that one to kind of get that one finally out of the way. And then we'll be into March of 1982. Unless something else strikes my fancy to do. It's my channel. I can choose to do whatever I want. That's the nice part about doing this. Just me. So thank you for watching, and thanks for taking this ride with us. Bye.